Welcome to Sabotage, the psychology of racing, and most drivers don't realise the exact moment they lose discipline during a race, because it usually doesn't happen during the mistake itself.
Pumping beats, ripping mics, flipping waves, intravenous flow, got you all on the rig, on lock, it's a cinch, one shot, it's a switch, yeah I'm good every day, but I'm better in the clinch, don't really rock chains, I'm much better with the whips, all black paint job, full leather with the tints, hanging out the window of that bitch like, yeah, you and you, get your hands up quick, I got 100 dogs on the leash, how to let them go, 1,000 hands in the crowd, we can make them all.
It happens one corner earlier. The moment they realise they're not gaining time, the gap ahead stays exactly the same. The delta stops improving, and without even noticing it, the driver begins forcing the car harder and harder in an attempt to create speed through effort alone. That is the moment the feedback loop of aggression begins.
The face hitting so you ought to know what time it is, head knock, yeah we want it all. Stick up, stick up, stick up, stick up, whoa. Get up, get up, get up, get up, go.
Every driver knows this feeling. You exit a corner and it feels fast. The car rotates well, the exit feels clean, and in your head, you already expect the delta to improve. But then you look up, and nothing's changed. Maybe the gap stayed neutral, maybe you gained 100th, maybe you even lost time. And psychologically, this creates something very important: frustration without visible cause. Because in the driver's mind, effort should equal reward. If the corner felt faster, then the lap should have become faster too. But racing doesn't work like that. And this is where the first emotional shift happens. The driver stops trusting execution and starts chasing outcome. This is where the neurological trap begins. The human brain naturally associates increased effort with increased performance. That works in almost every physical activity. If you sprint harder, you usually move faster. If you lift harder, you usually produce more force. But racing is different. In racing, precision creates speed, not tension. And when a driver becomes frustrated by a static gap or a non-improving delta, the brain unconsciously responds by increasing effort. The steering inputs become more aggressive, the braking becomes sharper, throttle application becomes rushed, and most importantly, the driver starts trying to force speed into the car through sheer intent. But the harder the driver tries to force the lap, the less sensitive they become to what the car is actually doing. And this is where discipline quietly starts collapsing. One of the biggest things drivers fail to notice is how emotional frustration changes the body physically. The grip on the wheel tightens, the shoulders tense, the jaw locks, the breathing becomes shallow, and suddenly the car no longer feels smooth underneath them. Because tension reduces sensitivity, the driver becomes less connected to the weight transfer, less connected to grip, less aware of the slip angle. So even though they believe they're pushing the car harder, they're actually receiving less information from it. And this creates a dangerous cycle, because the worse the feedback becomes, the more aggressively the driver tries to compensate. More steering angle, more brake pressure, more urgency. But urgency is exactly what destroys consistency. And this is the point where most races begin falling apart. Not because the driver suddenly becomes slow, but because the race stopped becoming strategic and they started becoming emotional. The exact moment discipline breaks down is usually very subtle. The driver notices the car ahead is not getting closer. Lap after lap, the gap remains static. And eventually, patience disappears. The driver no longer thinks, how do I maximize this corner? Now their thinking becomes, I need to gain time immediately. That single psychological shift changes everything. Because once urgency enters the decision-making process, the driver stops building the lap progressively. They start attacking situations emotionally, dive-bombing braking zones that were never really available, overcommitting entry speed, sacrificing exits for short-term gains, trying to force momentum where the car physically cannot carry it. The race stops becoming proactive and starts becoming reactive. And reactive driving almost always creates instability. Fast, disciplined drivers experience the exact same frustration. The difference is that they don't interpret it emotionally. They understand that pace comes from accumulated execution, not isolated moments of aggression. They trust rhythm, they trust consistency, and most importantly, they understand that forcing the car usually slows them down. So instead of reacting to the gap ahead, they focus on maintaining sensitivity to the car underneath them. Because elite drivers know something that most people never realise. The moment you start driving with urgency instead of awareness, you stop driving naturally. Most drivers think aggression creates speed, but uncontrolled aggression usually appears at the exact moment discipline disappears. The moment frustration replaces patience, the driver begins fighting the race instead of reading it. That is why so many drivers destroy their consistency while trying to become faster, because they are no longer driving based on what the car needs, they're driving based on what their emotions want. And if you want to become consistently fast, the goal is not to remove aggression completely, it is to prevent aggression from taking control of your decision making. Because the moment you start trying to force lap time, you stop allowing the car to give it to you naturally. The harder you try to force lap time, the further away it usually gets. Not because you're incapable of driving faster, but because frustration has changed the way you're approaching the race. The next time the gap ahead stops shrinking, pay attention to what happens next, because that moment, right there, is where discipline is either maintained or lost. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to subscribe to the channel and check out my video on why most drivers are stuck at the same lap time, because it connects directly to everything we've talked about today.